gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? The show starts in 3, 2, 1, go.
Good morning, CaneSport. It's September the 6th, 2022. I'm Gary Ferman, the publisher of CaneSport.com, joined as always by our managing editor, Matt Shodell, as we discuss the news of the day presented by LifeWallet, where the time is now to take charge of your personal health. And Matt, so much really for us to talk about. Let's start with the conversation coming out of Miami football headquarters after the season opener against Bethune-Cookman on Saturday. Everybody's got a lot to talk about. The coaches, us, the media, and of course the fans, because now they've been able to touch and feel their 2022 Miami Hurricanes. And a lot of the talk is about the defense, obviously. I mean, you know, the offense, when we met with Josh Gaddis yesterday, he really didn't have a whole heck of a lot to sink his teeth into. His unit performed great. And the thing that really stood out to me offensively, Matt, was that it wasn't just the first team. It was the second team, the third team, whoever they put on the field on offense was well prepared, knew their assignments, executed well. Your backup quarterback, Jake Garcia, 8 for 8. The receivers were catching the ball. The tight ends were involved. This was a well-oiled machine to start the season from Miami on offense. And I got to attribute that to the coaches. I mean, who else do you attribute it to, Matt?
Well, I told you, listen, they're playing Bethune-Cookman, okay, Gary? It's not like they just beat the greatest team in the world. But I told you my positives yesterday, the offensive line and special teams. That's all that I took away from that. Like the receivers, if you're wide open and you're a wide receiver and you get a nice little ball thrown to you, great. When they're darting a ball into tight coverage and you got to extend in the middle of the field, not knowing if a safety's there, you know, that's when you say, okay, the problem is solved. Not when you're open by 2 steps and they just like lay a ball right in there that, you know, honestly, that you can catch even. So, look, I'm not going to judge the receivers off this game and say, oh, yeah, everything's great now. I will judge the offensive line on not having any penalties at all, which I said yesterday. I can't remember the last time that happened. Yeah. And I will judge special teams for the effort creating seams that we haven't seen against any opponent, even named Central Connecticut State, in years.
Special teams, I'm not getting hung up on personally.
I thought Bethune was because Andy Borregales, who they were concerned couldn't kick the ball into the end zone, looked amazing. And listen, Keyshawn Smith, people might, you know, like we talked about yesterday, Devin Hester would have scored probably 2 touchdowns in the game on Saturday. Keyshawn Smith's fine. Like, he's fine. I'm not going to say he's Devin Hester because he's not. Nobody really is, but he's fine. And I think that a lot of it will have to do with what kind of seams they open for him. And you can tell there's just such a difference with what Marwan Malouf has taught these guys. Even yesterday, you know, I was talking to a player who shall not be named, but it'll come out eventually in something we do. But he was saying how the attention to detail on special teams is just different now. It's different. And as an example, he said how it seems obvious to the fans, right? But he said one of the practices, I assume this fall, that they worked on a special teams drill. And the only purpose of this drill was to have everybody line up on a kickoff and not be offsides and start correctly. And by start correctly, this is the attention to small details that Marwan Malouf demands. That means the kicker has to be a yard ahead of you, kick the ball a yard ahead of you, and then bam, you know, you're taking off to make sure that A, you're full speed, 1 yard behind him at the time of kick, and you don't have to slow down to make sure you're not going off sides. And this player said they had to do it over and like it seems like it's obvious. No, they had to work on it forever to make it right. But once it's right, it's right. It's like, let's say, for example, that an amazing sports online magazine, we'll just like randomly call it CaneSport. Let's say they hire an amazing new reporter, right? And let's say that reporter needs to be trained like every reporter for covering a new beat. And this is all hypothetical, of course. But, you know, you tell that person, let's just call him, I don't know, Azubi Charles. Let's just make up a name, okay? And you tell him like, here's how we do it at CaneSport, and then he attempts to do it, and he does it, pretty well, honestly. But you want it to be perfect, 100% perfect. And so you say, listen, that was a great job. Now let's do it this way and see if that gets it better. And you keep on pushing and pushing and pushing until, bam, he's a yard behind Matt Shodell at kickoff.
All right, let me stop you because I have thoughts. I have thoughts about what you just said, and you are getting way off on tangents. All right.
Never.
Special teams.
That doesn't sound like me.
I think most of us, watched the Florida State LSU game on Sunday night. And what a perfect example of how not paying attention to the finer points on special teams can cost you a ball game. LSU lost to Florida State because they had a field goal blocked and they had an extra point blocked. And the extra point was especially weak because Mason Taylor, who otherwise I thought looked spectacular as a tight end, they've got him on the left side, and he allowed a rusher to get inside of him and easily block the extra point that would have tied the game and sent it into overtime. Now, I don't know if they drilled that in training camp or not. I'd like to think they didn't drill it enough if Mason Taylor screwed up that badly. But either way, you're putting a true freshman over there, and it cost you a ball game. And so you can't drill all these fine points enough. And the preparation on special teams showed on the return team. We saw good blocking on the kickoffs. Bethune-Cookman was horrendous on kickoff coverage, so I'm not making too big a deal of that. But it doesn't diminish the fact that Miami came in well prepared. But now, in terms of my point on offense, Matt, I understand what you're saying. I understand the competition isn't great. It'll be different at Texas A&M than it was Saturday with Bethune-Cookman. That's all fine and good. But the defense had preparation too, and they have a lot of things to work on. The offense really was really efficient, I thought. From the offensive line to the quarterbacks to the receivers, top to bottom. And I'm willing to give credit for that. I don't care that it was Bethune-Cookman. It was the first game of the year, and they showed up, and they were clean. There were no stupid penalties. Everybody knew what they were doing, and it looked good. They were able to do whatever they wanted on offense because they were significantly better than Bethune-Cookman, but also because they were well prepared. Okay, so we're not going to worry about the offense on this show this morning. But I do want to talk about the defense because so much conversation right now in training camp with Mario Cristobal, with Kevin Steele, is dealing with a lot of busts. And Bethune-Cookman threw for 249 yards in the game. They had chunk passing plays of 28, 34, 48, and 44 yards, in addition to one long running play of 21 yards. And that is not good. Way too many chunk yards. The coaches will be the first to say it. They are working hard on cleaning that up. And, they have to, from Mario Cristobal to Kevin Steele on down, Matt, they are focused on getting that fixed before they take on a Southern Miss offense this weekend, which is going to give them a lot of different looks. It's not a great team, but they got a back in Frank Gore Jr. that can do some damage. He lines up all different ways. They're going to see Wildcat. I think they have looks like 7 different quarterbacks or something like that. We're just starting to get into learning about them, but they have a lot. They got a lot of different looks that they're throwing at people, right?
So, okay. Well, first of all,
tell me first because I may have just gotten that wrong. Are they playing 7 different guys?
No. So they have what's called a super back. They call it a super back system. So their main quarterback, who got hurt in the second game last year. So he got hurt in the second game last year. They started using a lot of running backs at quarterback, along with some backup quarterbacks. And now
different guys, right?
Different guys.
Okay, good. I got that right.
Yeah, right. But now this year, their quarterback got hurt in the opener. At this moment, I'm not sure if he'll be able to play or not. But So then they started again. They had a backup quarterback they put in. He threw an interception, I think. They started using running backs like Frank Gore Jr. at quarterback, which you can call Wildcat or whatever. But, Frank Gore Jr. threw 4 touchdowns last season. He threw for 189 yards. He threw, I think, 20 passes or something. I don't know. I've started doing the preview prep for it. It's a weird offense, but they're predicated on running the ball. And so this is not going to be a game where we say, oh, the Miami secondary's got a problem, because they're not going to be able to test the Miami secondary, even if they're starting quarterbacks there. What they will try to do is create some damage in the run game. So I think this is actually going to be an interesting game, not because Miami might have a close game. No, Miami's going to kill them. They're not a good team. But because we'll get a sense for if this Miami front seven is as good as advertised, if they might still have some of these busted assignment problems that popped up here and there last year. I think Darrell Jackson and Akeem Messidor, from what I saw in the first game, I think those guys need to play a lot. I'm not a big fan of rotate. What do you say? 12 guys rotated on the defensive line last game? Like
17.
Yeah, I'm just not a fan of that. And listen,
Kevin Steele wasn't a fan of it either.
There's a cornerback out there on this team who had a bust, and he said a reason for the bust was because he'd been out of the game so long, he wasn't in the flow of it. He was lazy. He says it was lazy, but he says the laziness was caused because he was on the sidelines for so long. And this is not just one player. This is what happens. This is like, I always equate stuff to other sports, right? So, for instance, in baseball, a lot of great baseball pitchers, you can tell from their first inning if they're going to be good or not. A lot of the best pitchers in the major leagues will struggle a little bit in the first inning, and you say they find their groove, and then they're just on target. Well, it's the same in football in a sense. If you put a guy on the sideline for a series or two, he doesn't necessarily come right back in and he's playing his best football again. It takes a minute for him to reacclimate. So that's just why I'm a fan of, let Akeem Messidor and Darrell Jackson play. If you're playing, 80 reps in a game, let them play 50 or 55 of those reps, not 30 or 35.
And we're going to see that sooner than later.
We're going to say, hey, I'm not so sure, Gary.
No, I'm sure.
Oh, we'll see.
Sure, we'll see. I heard Kevin Steele loud and clear yesterday, and he was a little frustrated because they're playing so many guys and so many different combos and everything, and he found different guys are good at different things, and I mean everybody doesn't play certain schemes as well as everybody else. And Kevin Steele, the musical chairs was so pronounced.
No, you're not understanding what Kevin Steele's trying to do.
I 100% understand. Wait, let me.
He's going to change it.
Wait! Don't interrupt me, because I did understand. What he was saying was that he had to be extra on his P's and Q's because they were rotating so many guys as who was in the game, and try to correlate that into an awareness of what he was calling based on what they're good of. And maybe that fell through the cracks a little bit more. But he made it very clear that as they move forward here, he is going to be tightening that rotation. And instead of 17, it might get down to 6 or 7 that are playing when the games get a little more serious here in the very near future. So, he made that pretty clear, Matt, I thought, and unless I misunderstood, but I don't think I did, because it makes a lot of sense, and you're going to see tighter rotations. I asked them also about the linebackers and specifically about Caleb Johnson, because I think all of us kind of expected Caleb Johnson to be a starter on this team. And Kevin Steele said, don't read too much into what we did the other day. I mean, you've heard what we've said about depth charts. We don't have a depth chart. And he kind of hinted that we'll see a lot more Caleb Johnson here down the road. And he said Caleb Johnson is doing extremely well. But to all you haters out there who have been ragging all over the place on Corey Flagg, the coaches also said that Corey Flagg played pretty well in this past game. So instead of ragging on Corey, let's give Corey some props, because maybe he's better, Matt, than the Corey Flagg of a year ago.
Well, I know you don't want me to address your mistaken understanding of
what Kevin I don't think it's a mistake, though.
Is doing on the defensive line. Well,
I'm curious to hear your interpretation, but I don't think it's a mistake.
Kevin Steele, his whole plan, okay, and this is how he coached this fall. He wants defensive linemen brought in tandem with each other. So he wants, when he rotates guys in and out, he's not just taking one guy in and out. He wants guys in the game who know how they play with the guy next to them, right? So he's not saying, okay, Darrell Jackson, you're playing 70%. And then the guy who he's training Darrell Jackson to play next to, but you're only playing 40%. He's playing them together. So when you're playing Darrell Jackson 70% of the game, you've got, in Kevin Steele's mind, he wants Darrell Jackson to know the player right next to him, how they play, what they do.
I didn't hear him say that. Maybe you did. But I will tell you this.
He didn't say that yesterday, Gary.
It's going to be more situational substitutions. Like
I am telling
you, there will be a couple guys that come in passing down.
Okay, but this is something that Kevin Steele said either to me or to the group at some point in the fall. That this is what he was doing, and it struck me at the time. I don't think we talked about it because I thought it was a brilliant idea. Because when you think about it, right, there's different stunts and different timings that you have to do when you're trying to, you see a defensive tackle go one way, the defensive end try to get inside of him, and you need to know what speed and what spacing with that particular player and how they move. So I thought it was brilliant.
Yeah, but Matt, that's going to be part of tightening the rotation which is what I'm talking about.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is
you're only playing 6 or 7 guys.
Right. If he wants to throw out,
they're used to playing with each other.
Right. So he has to throw out a little bit of what he worked on in the fall. If he does that, I think it's great. I think he needs to throw out a lot of what he was planning in the fall with these heavy rotations and just focus on the 2 or 3 difference makers and get them in the game at the key series and the key moments. And I don't care if they've played 40 snaps and the other guys played 30. Like, that's the guy I want in the game in the end of the third quarter when the other team's trying to drive to get within a touchdoy, whatever. Anyway,
I think you're going to see Messidor, you're going to see Agude, obviously, and you're going to see Jaleel Harvey a lot at defensive end. You're going to see Leonard Taylor. You're going to see Jackson. You're going to see Harrison Hunt, and maybe one other defensive tackle. So if you throw like a Jordan Miller in there or something, that's 7 guys. I think that's going to be the gist of the rotation when they start playing good teams. And it doesn't mean they won't sprinkle in somebody else. Obviously a Jacob Lichtenstein's going to play. He might actually play instead of Jordan Miller. But I'm just saying you're not going to see 17 guys playing on the defensive line against Texas A&M. And what Matt's saying is will fall into place along with what I'm saying, in all honesty, because once the rotation is tighter, then the guys that are next to each other are going to be used to playing with each other as a byproduct of that. So, the point is that there were so many guys playing. I said the other day that I think that did affect the overall performance on the field. There's no doubt in my mind about that. But I think it was the one game for the coaches where they could just play everybody and make everybody, so-called happy, see what everybody can do. And then now as they get into the season, they will obviously have tighter rotations.
Well, listen, Darrell Jackson and Akeem Messidor are going to be stars. You don't keep your stars on the bench. You play them to death. These guys, they used to get IVs at halftime. God forbid someone gets an IV at halftime and seems a little tired. I mean, Henry Parrish is trying to take himself out in the second and third series of the game because, maybe he has a little leg cramp or he's tired. I don't know. That the second time he tried to pull himself out, they're like, "What? We're playing football, bro. This isn't badminton." And they said, "Stay in the game." I'm so over this. Like, just play yourself to death, man. Like, if you're the best player, you play yourself to death. Anyway. And I don't literally mean to death, by the way, but you play yourself until you can't go anymore. So anyway, linebackers, listen, Corey Flagg, these are the perfect teams for Corey Flagg to play against. He's an undersized, under-physical, quicker middle linebacker. And against small offensive lines, man, he's going to dominate. And he's going to dominate again this coming weekend. But I hope they're not fooled into thinking when you get a really big physical offensive line that Corey Flagg is an answer at middle linebacker. I'm sorry, Corey. Like, that's just how I feel. Like, I think he's really good against the smaller, quicker offensive linemen where he can sort of, weave his way in, whereas a bigger, stronger, maybe less agile guy can't really get in those gaps. He's great for these games. Great. As for, it's funny. This strikes me as funny. I don't know why. I guess it's not funny. But it's so random how some guys get roasted and some guys just don't. So you're looking the first drive of the game, right? 3rd down and 7 maybe from inside the Miami 20, something like that. And their star tight end just completely blows by Wayman Steed. And perfect pass, and the tight end just drops it. Now, if the tight end catches that ball, people on the message boards aren't roasting DJ Ivey in the first quarter. They're roasting Wayman Steed. The worst thing that ever happened to DJ Ivey was that tight end dropping that pass. Because the whole game, it would have been like, Wayman Steed, what's he doing again out here, you know? So it's just, it tickles my funny bone, which I don't have a funny bone, as all of you that watch this know. But if I had a funny bone, it would tickle it. That it's just so random sometimes what happens in a game where one play defines a player, a missed tackle or two missed tackles or a busted coverage, and, you know, get rid of this guy. So listen, there's issues on defense, but it's game one. And these, you know, I said it yesterday, and I'm Mr. You call me Mr. Negative. I'm Mr. Realist, honestly. But listen, it's game one. There's so many positives on defense. There were so many positives on offense. I don't know why people are harping on a few busts on defense in game one.
Well, that's more than a few. There were a lot of them.
There was 5 explosive plays.
That's a lot for a game against Bethune.
Yeah. Alabama had the same problem against Bethune last year. They allowed 17 points. It's not the end of the world. It's actually good, because I don't want both sides of the ball thinking everything's hunky-dory and walking through practices like they're the greatest things in the world for 2 weeks and then playing Texas A&M. I want them to think, wow, we got problems. We better work extra hard this week, you know? Because we've seen so many times in the past where just things seem to be going great. Hey, we're 10-0, man. So what if we won 5-hour games by 1 point and we have lots of problems? We're 10-0, bro. We're in the top 10. And then you lose the last 3 games and get smoked, and you start wondering what went wrong. Well, what went wrong was you started thinking you were good. You know, I prefer teams. Listen, you know Matt Shodell's mantra, right? Nothing's ever as good as it seems. Everything is always as bad as it seems. So if they take that mantra, forget the anything is as good as you do everything, whatever the hell that is.
Anything
get rid of that.
Everything.
Yeah, get rid of that. The players can't even remember that.
They're remembering it. They're hearing it like multiple times a day. They're remembering it.
Listen, I'm not even kidding. If their mantra was, you know, nothing's ever as good as it seems and everything is always as bad as it seems, they would probably become an amazing team, because they'd realize, you know, it doesn't matter what you do well. Focus on what you're doing badly. That's basically what Matt Shodell is saying. It makes sense, right?
Right, of course. Yeah. No
and by the way, somebody in the message board pointed out that apparently when I'm talking positively, my voice gets very high. Is that true? I don't know. I got to control my pitch.
All right. So a lot of stories on the website this morning. We've got several addressing some of the different things that Mario Cristobal is focused on here early in the week, coming off the Bethune-Cookman game. We've got a story with Josh Gaddis talking about how proud he was of the preparation and how it showed on Saturday. And I really do think that the coaches deserve credit for that. In fact, I even asked Coach Gaddis if he thought he deserved credit for the fact that his receivers suddenly had done a complete turnaround, and the fact they were a problem the first 3 weeks of training camp. Now all of a sudden they're all catching the ball and doing well. Michael Redding made an appearance in the game the other day, and he kind of like laughed that off. But they do deserve credit. They're not going to give it to themselves. I'll give it to them. They deserve credit because the offense struggled a lot in training camp. But when it came time to turn on the lights, well, I guess they didn't turn on the lights. It was 3:30 game. When it came time to show up for the first game, they were polished and they knew what they were doing. And I'm going to give them credit for that, because you don't always see that in a first game. All right, we've got 5 takeaways from the conversation that was taking place out of training camp on Monday. We got a story.
Can I interject 1 second? Because you mentioned Josh Gaddis, and I have a quick question for you.
Go ahead.
I have a quick question for you. Did you find it? I found it odd. I've covered a lot of press conferences, so have you. Did you find it odd that sort of almost out of nowhere, Josh Gaddis offered up how he knows that Tyler Van Dyke had this string of 300-yard passing games, which hadn't even gone through my head. And he's like, but Tyler doesn't even worry about that. Like, he brought that up out of nowhere, which makes me only think that Tyler is worried about that. Like, I thought that was weird, man. Like, why?
I'll tell you who's worried about it more than Tyler is the Drew Rosenhaus Rosenhaus Sports because he's their plum client going into the draft right now.
Did you think it was weird that he brought that up out of nowhere? Just a totally random thing like that?
I did. You know what? That was interesting. I agree, and I did make a mental. It did register with me mentally.
Yeah. I don't know what that was about, man. But
they clearly, they did not go out of their way even close to try to get Tyler Van Dyke 300 yards yesterday.
No. But it's just weird he even mentioned it.
It's almost like they did it on purpose because their mission yesterday was to build a running game and get that O-line work and the running backs and run the football. And
listen, I have a working theory. You want to hear my working theory on why he said that?
Why?
Their goal is to keep Tyler Van Dyke's yards as few as possible, so he comes back for another year.
But then does Jake stay if that's the case?
People are going to think I'm serious now. That was not a serious statement.
The NIL budget for quarterbacks will be enormous if that ends up being the case, because Tyler Van Dyke would command $1 million NIL deal to come back next year.
Where, Gary? Who's going to offer him more? Some other school. I don't want to get into NIL.
No, but he will command.
It'll be a bidding war.
Yeah, it would be a bidding war, but it wouldn't be a bidding war because Miami would do whatever they got to do to get him to stay. But let's not jump.
Miami can't do it. Just to be clear, Gary, so we don't get Miami.
Miami can't. I know the NIL people. I get it, but my point is the Miami NIL community would do whatever they needed to do to get
much better phrase. Thank you.
A better
NCAA can stay in Indianapolis. Thank you, Gary.
Yeah, I read somebody saying that the NCAA came down here trying to put John Ruiz out of business, which is not accurate because he is doing everything by the book. He's got an army of attorneys that have reviewed everything. Everything is by the book and legal. So there was never a possibility of him being put out of business because he is running NIL the proper way. And that's not an issue. But anyway, Jake Garcia is going to command a lot too if he's being asked to be a backup for one more year. So we'll see.
You want to hear a funny Jake Garcia thing?
Sure.
So I get a photo of Jake Garcia, and he's got his mouth guard like he's chewing on it. Like there was a picture that our photographer took, right? And his mouth guard's like dangling out of his mouth. He's throwing the pass, and the mouth guard is dangling out of his mouth, almost like he's vaping his mouth guard. That's what it looks like. It looks like a mouth guard vape, like he's created, like he's got on Shark Tank and created this new product called Mouth Guard Vape. And I reached out to some sources to find out why does he chew on his mouth guards, and how many mouth guards does he have? How many mouth guard vape devices does he have in his locker? And what I was told, I don't know if this is true or not, but you can tell me if this is true or not. Maybe you can work your sources, Gary. I was told that I guess he accidentally threw somebody, I don't know who, if they do their own laundry or not, but he accidentally put his mouth guard in the dryer. And when he got to the game, he realized it was warped and it wouldn't fit in his mouth. And instead of having an offensive lineman bash his teeth in to make it fit, he just decided to sort of dangle it out his mouth and chew on it for the whole game. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's actually is what I heard.
Yeah, well, we'll have to work on that one. I don't know, but anyway, so where were we? We were talking about Josh Gaddis, bringing up that Tyler Van Dyke's streak of six 300-yard games in a row was broken.
By the way, if I send you that picture of Jake, can you put it on the screen?
Yeah.
If I email it to you?
Yeah.
Or should I text it to you?
Email it to me.
All right,
and
I'll have it right now. So everyone can see the amazing contraption that Jake Garcia developed.
But I don't think I hope Tyler's not worried about that. I mean, he's going to have plenty of opportunities to throw for 300 yards this season in a row. Doesn't really matter. They weren't looking to pass the ball and show all their passing plays against.
I sent it to you.
They were looking to work on the running game, get the offensive line going, and just get improve in that area of the offense. All right, give me another 5 seconds here, Matt. I'm going to
send you a close up of his face because I don't know if he was to see it in the bigger picture or not.
Well, let's see. I'm going to put that one up.
Put that one up, and I'm telling you.
There it is, man.
Can you see it?
There it is. You can see the green mouthpiece kind of dangling outside of his mouth.
Well, I just sent you a close up of his face also, so that you can put that up too.
All right, I'll work on that while you provide color commentary.
Yeah, I mean he was 8 for 8 while vaping a mouthpiece. I mean that's got to be a record. That's got to be a record. 100% completion while vaping a mouthpiece.
All right, let me see here. I'll have the second one up here in a second. I don't know that I mean, I've seen people chewing on their mouthpieces, but
in the middle of a pass. I mean, and there's our photographer. Yeah, there.
Yeah, there it is.
I can't even. And the photographer got a couple of others of his face too. And every pass he threw that the photographer took a picture of, he's just chewing on the mouthpiece just like that with it sticking half out of his mouth.
He looks pretty intense there.
Yeah, it actually looks like, you know, those when you go up north, you get those like green bean pods at the farmers markets. You know, it looks like one of those that he's just sucking the green beans out of, like edamame or something. You know.
Well, so anyway, so yeah, the 300-yard streak is over. C'est la vie, no big deal. I don't think the coaches could care less. They are not worried about individual exploits. They are trying to put a team together here that can contend to win the ACC, and to do that, and I agree with them on this, they got to be able to run the ball, and they got to have physicality up front on the offensive line, and that is what the tone that was clearly the agenda in the Bethune-Cookman game. Okay, so we've got that on the site. We've got 5 takeaways of the day, a story on Kevin Steele. Again, Mario Cristobal talking about offense, talking about defense. And then we got a few recruiting stories, and I want to talk about those. But first, let's take a moment here, and let's hear from our friends at Life Wallet.
I'm Angela Green, and I am Life Wallet.
Since I've had Life Wallet, I have felt more secure to play.
To protect you and your family, download Life Wallet now.
Because of Life Wallet, I feel more secure to play and be a setter on the volleyball team and set up Angela Grieve to spike the ball. I like. Listen,
Do you want a Matt Shodell fun fact? Matt Shodell was in person at a volleyball match last year of the team that won the national championship. It's a true story. I was there. I watched.
Really? Wisconsin?
I watched the Wisconsin volleyball team in person. My wife and I went to visit my son. I had to wear a disguise because in case there was any Miami fans that saw me up there. He said, hey, there's a volleyball game I want to go to. And I said, all right, we'll go. And they wound up winning the national title. They had this one girl in the middle who was unbelievable. I think she's playing overseas now, but she was unbelievable. I think she's 6'8", 6'9", athletic. I mean, she could play tight end at Miami, quite honestly. She was a great athlete.
All right, let's talk recruiting here for a moment so we can let everybody get into their offices. So we've got a few recruiting stories on the site today. There's a defensive back wide receiver from Hollywood Chaminade who gets a call from Miami coaches. Miami hasn't been recruiting him real hard, but they've been watching him, and he's played very well in preseason and then in the opening game against Dillard last week. And they asked him to come down to campus for a meeting, whatever. So he's very excited. He goes down there. While he's there, he ends up staying for 3 hours, and he gets a Miami offer. So it's a really cool story. We've got that story on the website today.
By the way, so we tried to do a full story, not just write some dumb 4-paragraph thing like, hey, this kid got an offer and he's a 4-star or 3-star or whatever. So, I talked to the kid, I talked to his coach. So I called this coach, Damian Jones, who I've talked to for years, great guy, great coach. And I said, I said, what's the deal? Miami's just offering him so late in the game compared to other prospects. Is he really a Miami caliber recruit? And Damian, who's normally very level-headed, he starts almost yelling. He's like, I don't understand why he wasn't offered earlier. Like, this kid's amazing. So yeah, I'm glad that Miami, it's always nice when you talk to a recruit whose dad's a big Miami fan, the kid's a Miami fan. It's always nice to do stories like this instead of doing stories on someone who's had an offer for 2 years and is just telling you, yeah, I've got a top 50. They're all still even. I'm visiting Alaska, Colorado, Minnesota, Hawaii, and Bangladesh over the next 2 months. And then I'll narrow it down to a top 43. And I'll announce at an all-star game to be determined. Who wants that? This is like a feel-good story, man. I love these stories. Like, these are the stories that I enjoy writing. And I'm very happy for him and his family. And I do think he'll be a Miami Hurricane as long as Miami continues to show interest and want him.
Yeah, very, very cool story. The other thing that we're seeing on the recruiting front is Miami's looking for DBs. There's a focus on the DB position, and there's another one that's starting to emerge out of American heritage by the name of Shamar McNeil. And he's a Missouri commit right now. He was in the Miami recruiting section on Saturday, and he updates for us where things stand with him.
Yeah, and by the way, he's buddies with Damari Brown. I mean, these guys can help. You know, you want players that can come together and that are great players, right? And you know, they're going to evaluate Shamar. He doesn't have an offer yet, but the point is, if they do offer him, and you've got 3 other kids that are huge priorities in that program, I think they get Damari Brown. But if you want to try to get Fletcher and Innis, and if you have a real good season, you got a chance at them. Well, they're buddies with those other 2 guys.
Take them all, man.
It doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt anything.
Yeah, take them all.
And by the way, you know, Fletcher and Innis, I've been talking about Fletcher forever. I still think Miami's got, I wouldn't say it's 50-50, but I think they've got a 25% chance, maybe 30% chance, especially if the offensive line keeps playing, you know, the way they did that first weekend. And I think he needs to see a reason not to stay home. So if it's, hey, Miami's 50-50 with Ohio State in terms of his potential, he's coming to Miami, man. And he wants to be here, so they sort of have to show him a reason not to be here. Innis, I think, is a little more iffy. So we'll see. But
I agree. I mean, he's tweeting Buckeye Nation, I'm here.
No, it's not just that. It's just he's never really, unlike Mark, who really always wanted to be here. Brandon just has always been a national guy. He just wants to sort of have that national thing going on. A lot of kids, they just want to get away for college. It's okay. It's got nothing to do with anything in particular. But Brandon's one of those guys, whereas Mark is a guy who really would probably rather stay home if it's the right situation. That's all.
All right. And we also have a story today on a 2024 quarterback by the name of Air Noland. What a name, Air Noland. And he details his early Miami recruitment for us. And
I know it's going to shock you, Gary, but Air is his nickname, not his given name.
I know that.
He wasn't born a quarterback throwing passes. Just so yeah.
I know that.
Well, I want to be clear because he's one of the names he has.
I still like the fact that he likes to go by Air. Like, he likes to go by the nickname.
Yeah. I mean, listen, Prentice is a cool name too,
Yeah, it's cool. All right, that's going to do it today for Good Morning CaneSport. If you like the show, hit your like button, hit your subscribe button. It'll help us with YouTube, the algorithms, and so forth and so on. I'm assuming by now that you've subscribed to CaneSport.com. If you have not, we continue to offer a $1 annual introductory special to come be part of the new CaneSport.com.
Hey, and Gary gives me 1 cent out of every $1 he makes.
1 cent.
So
that's
subscribe.
It.
Listen.
1 cent.
If we can get 100 subscribers, then I can actually buy my own subscription, which would be amazing. I just need $1.
That's
need 100 subscribers.
Now the good news is we are growing every day. We're developing a great community on CaneSport.com. If you're not part of it yet, we hope you will decide to come join us and be there with us every single day. So that's going to do it for Good Morning CaneSport for today. Thank you for making us part of your commute. For Matt Shodell, I'm Gary Ferman. We'll have more for you tomorrow, everybody. Have a great day.